The mail-order bride arrived alone at the station, until the rancher whispered, "Home." The wind at the edge of the frontier station carried dust and cold in the same breath, whispering through the loose boards of the platform as the last evening train shrieked into silence and left her standing there with her hands clasped so tightly around her carpet bag that her knuckles had turned white, her breath unsteady, her eyes sweeping the empty dirt road. In a panic, she tried, and failed, to hide. Because the man who had written her letters, who had promised a new life and warm meals and a place to belong, had not stepped off the train, had not appeared from behind the freight crates, had not called her name, and the longer she waited, the clearer the truth became, until it settled like a stone in her chest. She had been left, forgotten, possibly even rejected before the first moment had begun, and the realization made her legs weak beneath her long, travel-worn skirt, the fabric still carrying the scent of coal smoke and cold nights spent sitting upright during the journey west, hoping each mile was carrying her toward someone who actually wanted her. A pair of ranch hands leaning near the water pump whispered behind their hands, casting quick glances at her like she was a curiosity rather than a person, and the station master, an older man with a crooked hat and tired eyes, tried to look busy, stacking parcels, though his gaze kept drifting back to her with a mix of pity and uncertainty. Nobody stepped forward to greet her. Nobody called out her name. Nobody came to guide her toward a wagon or a home or even a bench where she could sit and gather her thoughts. She swallowed hard, lifting her chin even as her hands trembled, and told herself she would not cry. She had promised that to herself when she'd boarded the train, that she would show strength even if her heart felt like a fragile thing, waiting for one more disappointment to shatter it. But when the sun began to slip behind the ridge west of town, and the long shadow of the water tower stretched across the platform like a reminder of how quickly warmth could disappear on the frontier, she realized she had nowhere to go and no one waiting for her. She considered stepping inside the tiny station shack to ask about lodging, but before she could take a single step, a distant sound broke through the wind. The slow, steady hoofbeats of a horse approaching, with the confidence of someone who didn't rush anywhere except when it mattered. She turned, expecting another stranger, maybe someone passing by without notice, but instead she saw a man riding in with the kind of presence that settled the air around him. A tall rancher on a dark bay horse, his shoulders broad beneath a worn coat, his hat pulled low against the wind, his gaze sharp enough to catch every wrong thing in a scene. And when his eyes landed on her, just her, alone on that platform, they softened, not in pity, but in understanding, as if he had already pieced together the truth she was trying so hard to hide. He slowed his horse beside the station and dismounted without looking away, dust circling his boots as he approached with quiet steps. And in that instant, with the cold pressing at her back, the emptiness heavy around her, and the air humming with the sound of his steady approach, she felt something inside her shift. A thin thread of fear loosening just enough for a single, fragile thought to slip through. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she believed. He stopped just a few feet from her, the fading light catching on the faint dust across his coat, making him look like he belonged to the land itself, steady, weathered, unmoving, even as the wind tugged at his hat brim. And the way he stood there, not demanding, not staring, not judging, but simply being present, made her heartbeat stumble in her chest, because no one had ever looked at her with that kind of quiet patience before. His eyes, a calm shade softened by years of watching storms come and go across the prairie, stayed fixed on her face long enough for her to realize he wasn't trying to decide if she was trouble or charity. He was trying to understand what had broken in her and how long she had been standing in that cold, pretending she wasn't shaking. "Ma'am," he said finally, the word slow, gentle, and low enough that it cut through the chatter of the ranch hands and the clatter of a wagon wheel somewhere down the road. "You've been waiting a long while." She tried to straighten her posture, clutching her carpetbag tighter as if it could anchor her, but her voice still caught when she answered. "The man who sent for me, he didn't come." He didn't react with surprise or a raised brow, only a small exhale through his nose, the kind a man makes when a story he's heard too many times shows up one more time on his land. He glanced once toward the empty road, then back at her with a certainty that made her throat tighten. "That's not your fault," he said, and the simplicity of the words, the lack of blame or pity, nearly undid her. One of the ranch hands muttered something behind them, something about a woman being left already. But the rancher turned his head just slightly, and the two cowboys went silent instantly, as if they knew better than to challenge the quiet authority of a man who rarely spoke but always meant every word. When he looked at her again, he softened his stance, lowering his voice like he was speaking to someone who had been wounded before, someone he refused to scare. "Train station's no place to stand alone at dusk," he murmured. "Coyotes come close, so do the wrong kind of men." She swallowed, her fingers trembling harder now that someone besides herself noticed her fear. "I don't know where else to go," she admitted, her voice barely above the wind. He nodded once, slow and thoughtful, as though he'd been expecting that honesty. "Name's Ezra Walker," he said. "I've got a ranch not far past the ridge." His voice had the kind of steadiness that felt like a warm coat around her shoulders. Strong, certain, promising nothing except that he wasn't here to harm her. She parted her lips, unsure of what he was offering, afraid of assuming too much. But before she could ask, he looked into her eyes with a calm that reached inside her chest and steadied her from the inside out. "You don't have to decide anything right now," he said, "but you're cold, you're tired, and you're not staying out here alone while the night comes down." He stepped back half a pace, giving her space instead of taking it, waiting, not pushing, not looming, simply waiting, as if her choice mattered. And for the first time since she stepped off the train into a life she thought she was ready for, someone stood still long enough for her to breathe. Ezra didn't rush her. He simply walked beside her at a steady, unhurried pace, his boots sinking into the dust with the weight of a man who'd carried silence longer than most men carried pride. And by the time they reached his horse, a tall, calm sorrel with a coat the color of burnt copper, her breath had steadied just enough to keep her from trembling. He placed one hand gently on the saddle horn and looked at her with a question in his eyes, not an order, not a demand. "You ride?" he asked. She hesitated, fingers curling around the worn handle of her carpetbag. "A little," she whispered, ashamed of how small her voice sounded. But Ezra only nodded once, like that was all the answer he needed. "Good, I'll lift you up slow." His voice was so steady, so patient. She almost believed she wasn't shaking anymore, almost believed that the ground beneath her feet wasn't tilting under the weight of a future she no longer understood. He took her bag and secured it behind the saddle with a care that felt oddly reverent, as though he understood what little she owned was stitched with fear, hope, and everything she had left in the world. Then, with one arm beneath her knees and the other steady at her back, he lifted her, not roughly, not like a parcel waiting to be claimed, but gently, as though she were something fragile he refused to mishandle, and set her onto the horse with a softness that startled her breath away. She settled awkwardly, uncertain, gripping the leather with both hands while praying she wouldn't fall. Ezra didn't mount behind her like she expected. Instead, he took the reins, clicked his tongue softly, and began leading the horse forward on foot. She blinked at him, confused. "You're walking?" He glanced up at her, the faintest warmth flickering in his otherwise quiet expression. "Ain't right for a woman to ride behind a stranger in the dark her first night off a train," he said, simply. "You stay steady in the saddle. I'll keep us pointed home." That single word, home, softened something sharp inside her chest. She turned her face toward the horizon, where the first traces of night were gathering in the blue folds of the land, and she tried not to imagine what the man who sent for her was doing now. Whether he ever meant to come at all, or if she was just another name scribbled in a ledger, forgotten as soon as ink dried. "Why did you stop for me?" she asked, her voice trembling with the kind of fear that always comes after a long day of pretending to be brave. Ezra didn't answer right away. Instead, he guided the horse around a rocky bend where the station lights faded entirely, leaving them in the quiet company of wind and distant crickets. "Because no woman should stand alone at a station with nowhere to go," he said finally. "And because I've seen too many folks left behind in this world." His words weren't meant to be poetic, but they wrapped around her just the same, softening the ache beneath her ribs. They rode, or rather, she rode while he walked, for a long stretch without speaking. The only sounds the steady clop of hooves and the rustle of dry grass. And every mile put between her and the empty station felt like another layer of fear falling off her shoulders. When the faint shape of a ranch house appeared far off under the rising moon, she exhaled shakily. Ezra didn't look up at her, didn't try to reassure her with pretty words. He simply tightened his hold on the reins and said, "You're all right now. We're almost there." And somehow she believed him. By the time the ranch finally came into view, the moon had climbed high enough to wash the land in a pale silver glow, softening every hard edge of the prairie until it looked almost gentle, almost like a place a heart could rest without fear. The house itself wasn't large, not the grand white-railed kind she'd imagined a wealthy rancher might own, but a sturdy, weathered home with a stone chimney and warm lamplight spilling from one window, as if someone inside always kept a flame burning in case a soul returned late. Anna's throat tightened at the sight. It had been so long since she'd seen a house with a light kept on for her, or for anyone who mattered. Ezra finally swung himself into the saddle behind her, not close enough to crowd her, but steady enough that she felt the shift of his weight. The solidness that made her instinctively sit straighter. "Easy now," he murmured to the horse as they approached the front steps. "Don't want to spook her on her first night." She wasn't sure whether he meant the horse or her, but either way, his voice curled around her with a strange gentleness. When they stopped, he dismounted first, landing with the soft thud of a man whose boots had known years of dust and disappointment. Then he reached up, hands open, giving her space to decide. "I'll help you down if you need it." She hesitated only a moment before placing her hands on his shoulders. He lifted her with the same careful ease he'd used earlier, steadying her until both her boots touched the porch. For a long, quiet second, she just stood there, taking in the scent of cedar and smoke drifting from the chimney. The soft creak of the porch boards in the wind, the distant lowing of cattle somewhere in the pasture. It felt nothing like the cold station, nothing like the life she was supposed to be leaving behind. Ezra stepped past her and opened the door, holding it wide. "You can come in. My sister's awake. She keeps the place running better than I ever did." Inside, the warm light revealed a small but tidy room. Wooden table, braided rug, shelves lined with jars and folded quilts. And standing near the stove was a woman with dark hair pinned loosely back, sleeves rolled to her elbows, and a ladle in hand. She looked up, startled. "Ezra, you're late." Her gaze snapped to Anna, then softened, then shifted to Ezra again with a mixture of confusion and understanding. "Oh," she breathed. "You found her." Ezra cleared his throat, suddenly looking like a giant man with no idea where to put his hands. She was still at the station. Nobody came. Didn't feel right leaving her there. His sister set down the ladle, stepped forward, and offered a small, warm smile. "I'm Miriam. You must be Anna." Anna swallowed. "Yes, I didn't know what else to do." "Well," Miriam said gently, brushing her hands on her apron, "you're here now, and that's what matters." She moved aside and gestured toward the stove. "Come sit. You look cold and hungry. Ezra will get your things." Anna tried to protest. She didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to appear helpless. But her stomach betrayed her with a quiet, aching twist. She sat at the table while Miriam poured warm stew into a bowl, the steam curling into the air like a promise she wasn't sure she deserved. Ezra brought her carpetbag in, but didn't sit, just leaned against the doorway, watching her with that unreadable steadiness. Not judgment, not pity, something quieter, something like duty mixed with concern. "We'll figure the rest out in the morning," he said softly. "Tonight you just rest." And for the first time since stepping off that train with nothing but a letter and hope gone cold, Anna felt like someone meant it. Anna woke to the faint crackle of the morning fire and the soft murmur of voices drifting from the kitchen, the kind that told her she was in someone else's home but not unwelcome. Her hands were still wrapped in the edges of the quilt Miriam had tucked around her the night before, a thick, hand-stitched thing that carried the scent of cedar wood and a warmth that had outlasted even her restless sleep. For a moment, lying there on the small cot they'd set up for her near the parlor, she forgot where she was, forgot the cold station, forgot the letter she carried from a man who never showed. Then she heard Ezra's voice, a low rumble through the wall, and every memory fell back into place. "She can stay as long as she needs," he was saying. "She doesn't have anywhere else." Miriam answered, quieter. "I know, Ezra. But you can't shoulder every broken thing that crosses your path." "This isn't that," he said, though his tone betrayed something unsure. "She was left alone. You didn't see her." Anna sat up, heart hammering at the idea that she was the subject of their morning discussion, that she was already becoming a weight they might regret lifting. She smoothed her hair, tidied the quilt, and stepped into the doorway. "Good morning," she whispered. Both siblings turned. Miriam smiled instantly, warm as ever. Ezra straightened, clearing his throat as if he'd been caught saying something personal. "Morning," he said softly. "Hope you slept well." Anna nodded, though her voice stuck for a beat. "Very well, thank you. I didn't mean to overhear." Miriam approached her, touching her arm lightly. "You're fine. We just want you to feel safe." Ezra looked down at his coffee, shoulders tightening the way a man does when he's suddenly aware of how large he looks in a small room. "There's food on the table," he said. "Eat first." She sat, lifting the warm bread between her fingers. It had been months since someone cooked for her. Months since she ate at a table with people who weren't passing judgment, weighing her worth by dowry or appearance or usefulness. "Thank you," she murmured. "Both of you." Ezra shifted in his chair as if the gratitude unsettled him. "It's just breakfast." Miriam shot him a look. "It's kindness," she corrected. He said nothing, but Anna didn't miss the way his jaw relaxed. After breakfast, Miriam handed her a folded dress. "This should fit well enough for now. Take your time. Bathwater's still warm." Anna tried to protest, but Miriam simply squeezed her hand. "Honey, you've been through enough. Let us help." Down the hall, she changed slowly, brushing out her hair in the small mirror. She barely recognized herself. Eyes softer, shoulders eased, breathing steady. As she stepped outside to hang her wash stockings on the line, Ezra was already tending the horses. The rising sun lit the edge of the prairie, painting him in gold. He glanced over, the brim of his hat shadowing his eyes. "You settle in all right?" "Yes," she said. "Better than I have in a long time." He nodded, then hesitated, as if weighing his next words. "I meant what I said last night. You're safe here." She looked down. "I'm not asking for anything." "I know," his voice softened, "but someone should have promised you that a long time ago." She met his gaze then, truly met it, and something unspoken passed between them. Not a romantic spark yet, not bold or sudden, but the quiet recognition of two people who had both lost something and didn't know how to name what they'd found. "I'll work," she said. "Clean, cook, whatever helps." Ezra shook his head. "You rest today. We'll talk about the rest tomorrow." She nodded, though uncertainty stirred at the edges of her heart. She didn't want to be a burden, but neither did she want to leave. As she stepped back toward the house, she heard him add under his breath, words not meant for her to catch. "I just don't want her gone." And inside Anna's chest, something fragile shifted, something that had been frozen for far too long. Anna was sweeping the porch when she heard hooves thundering up the trail, the kind of urgent approach that made Miriam step out of the kitchen with her hands still dusted in flour. Ezra, who had been stacking hay near the barn, lifted his head sharply. The rider, a lean young postman with windburned cheeks, reined in hard. "Ezra Hale," he called. "Got a letter marked urgent." Ezra wiped his hands on his jeans and took the sealed envelope, brows tightening at the unfamiliar handwriting. The postman tipped his hat to Anna with a shy smile before riding off again, the dust still swirling in his wake. Anna froze when Ezra turned the envelope in his hands. She knew that seal. She knew it too well. Carter Fielding, the man who had written her sweet promises for 6 months and then abandoned her at the station without a word. The man she had crossed states to marry, the man who'd let her stand alone with her hope wilting in her hands. Her breath caught, the porch suddenly too small for her racing thoughts. "Ezra," she whispered, but he had already broken the seal, scanning the inked lines with a growing fire behind his eyes. Miriam stepped beside Anna, sensing the shift instantly. "What is it?" Ezra's jaw clenched. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he held the letter out to Anna. "It's for you," he said. He wrote to explain. Anna's hands trembled as she took it. She didn't want to read it, didn't want to reopen wounds she'd barely begun to understand. But she unfolded the page anyway. Anna, I heard you arrived in the territory. I'm sorry I couldn't meet you. Circumstances changed. I've married someone else. I can't offer you a home. Please don't seek me out. Her vision blurred. For a moment, she couldn't even breathe. She felt Miriam's hand slide around her back, steadying her. Ezra stepped closer, anger radiating off him like heat. He married someone else, Anna whispered, voice breaking. After everything, She crumpled the letter in her fist. I'm sorry, she choked. I didn't mean to bring trouble here. Ezra moved before she could pull away. Stop. The word was soft, but it rooted her in place. You didn't bring trouble. That man did, and he doesn't get the right to decide your worth. She shook her head, tears spilling freely now. But I came here because of him. I crossed states. I believed his letters. Ezra reached out, not touching her, but close enough she felt the intention. He lied. You didn't. Miriam's voice was firmer. He threw away a good woman. That's his shame. Anna tried to steady her breathing, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand, but humiliation settled like a stone in her stomach. I don't know what to do now, she whispered. I have nowhere to go. Ezra's voice dropped, low, steady, unshakable. You're not going anywhere. Anna looked up sharply. Ezra, you'll stay here, he said. You'll have a roof, food, safety, my sister's kindness, my word. The wind rustled across the prairie, carrying the warmth of his promise to her trembling heart. But she shook her head softly. I don't want to be a burden. You're not, he said, stepping closer, his shadow stretching long across the porch. And you won't be. Not here. Miriam squeezed Anna's shoulders. Family comes in strange ways out here. You're not alone anymore. Anna let out a slow, fragile breath. Something inside her loosened, something that had been strangled tight since the moment Carter turned cold. She looked down at the crumpled letter, then handed it to Ezra. Can you throw it away? Ezra didn't take it gently. He took it like a man accepting something heavy and undeserved. He didn't toss it in the bin. Instead, he fed it to the fire inside the small iron barrel near the porch. Anna watched the flames curl around each cruel word until nothing remained but ash. Ezra turned back to her, eyes steady. That's the last thing he gets to take from you, he said. Anna felt herself breathe again, not because the letter was gone, but because he had destroyed it for her, without hesitation. For the first time since she stepped off that train, she felt something unfamiliar. Hope. The day after the letter burned, the ranch woke early. Cattle bawled in the distant fields. The sun climbed soft and gold over the prairie grass, and the smell of fresh cornbread drifted through the open windows. Anna worked beside Miriam in the kitchen, her hands steady even though her heart still carried the raw sting of yesterday. She didn't say much, but she didn't hide either. She stayed where she had been welcomed, which was new, strange, and quietly comforting. Ezra walked in near mid-morning, dust on his boots and sweat beading at his temple from hauling feed in the heat. Town stirred up, he said. Word spread about Carter's letter. Anna's breath hitched. What did they say? Ezra tossed his gloves on the table and gave a humorless half smile. Depends who you ask. Half the town thinks Carter's a fool. The other half thinks he's a coward, Miriam snorted. Both are true. Ezra leaned against the counter, crossing his arms as he studied Anna, not with pity, but with the same steady, evaluating look he gave a skittish colt. Some folks asked if you're staying here. Anna's cheeks warmed. And what did you say? That it's none of their business, Miriam smiled proudly. Anna, unsure what to do with that warmth, dropped her gaze and pretended to focus on cutting apples. I don't want trouble, she murmured. Ezra stepped closer. Trouble came from him, not you. Before she could respond, the crunch of wagon wheels sounded outside. Ezra's posture stiffened instantly. Miriam peeked through the window, inhaling sharply. That's Sheriff Dalton's wagon. Anna froze, knife midair. Why would the sheriff be coming out here? A moment later, heavy boots sounded on the porch, and then the sheriff's low knock. Ezra opened the door with that mixture of respect and readiness he always carried. Sheriff? Ezra. Sheriff Dalton tipped his hat at him, then at Miriam, and finally at Anna, who stood small behind the table, fingers curled around the apron she wore. Ma'am, Anna swallowed. Sheriff, he cleared his throat. I'm here about Carter Fielding. Ezra's jaw flexed like iron. What about him? He came to my office this morning, Dalton said carefully. Claims he has reason to believe Miss Boyd might still try to pursue him, and he wants her removed from the territory. The room went still. Dead still. Anna felt her stomach drop, a cold, humiliating fear snaking through her chest. I don't want anything from him, she whispered. He's the one who left me. I just want to be safe. Sheriff Dalton nodded. I can see that. And to be frank, Ezra, he looked at him squarely. Carter's looking for trouble where there isn't any. Ezra didn't move for a long moment, rage simmering beneath his stillness, like boiling water beneath a tight lid. Sheriff, he said quietly, I'm going to say this one time. Anna stays, under my roof, under my protection. Anna's throat tightened. Dalton looked between the two of them, gauging the air between them with a knowing flicker in his eyes. Well, he said, adjusting his hat, I figured that's what you'd say. I'll file it as such. If Carter causes more noise, he'll answer to the law. Ezra stepped onto the porch with the sheriff, voice low, controlled, but Anna could hear the growl beneath each word. If he steps foot on this ranch looking for her, he'll answer to me first. Sheriff Dalton didn't disagree. He simply nodded, climbed onto his wagon, and rolled away down the trail. When the dust settled, Anna stood motionless inside the doorway, hands trembling. Miriam touched her arm gently. You all right, dear? Anna forced a nod. I didn't expect any of this. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Ezra, he stepped back inside before she could finish. Anna. She looked up, meeting his eyes, steady, concerned, but holding something deeper beneath the surface. You didn't cause anything, he said. Carter did. The sheriff knows it. The town knows it. And I know it. Her voice broke. But I don't want you defending me because you feel obligated. I'm defending you because you deserve to be defended. His voice was low, certain, unshakably sure. And because this ranch already feels different with you here, Anna felt tears gather, not from pain this time, but from something softer, something she didn't yet know how to name. Ezra, she whispered, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. He stepped closer, stopping just a breath from her. You stay, he said. You heal, and you let us take care of you for once. Anna exhaled slowly, her heart steadying for the first time in weeks. Outside, the prairie wind stirred the tall grass, moving in long, graceful waves, like the land itself was agreeing. Anna woke before sunrise the next morning, the faint blue light slipping through the lace curtains of the guest room. For the first time since leaving home, She hadn't dreamed of train whistles, cold stations, or empty platforms. She dreamed of warmth, of voices at the table, of Ezra standing between her and the world like a stone wall that chose to shelter rather than block. She sat up, brushed her hair, and followed the smell of breakfast drifting from the kitchen. Miriam was already at the stove, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had cooked through storms, births, funerals, and harvest seasons. "Morning, dear," she said warmly. "Sleep any better?" Anna nodded. "A little." "Good. You'll need your strength. We're heading into town today." Anna's heart jumped. "Town?" "Ezra needs supplies, and folks need to see you standing tall, not hiding." Anna hesitated. The idea of facing curious stares, whispers, judgment, it made her palms damp. But Miriam touched her arm gently. "Listen," she said, her voice steady. "What happened to you isn't shame. It's his shame. And this family stands together. You hear me?" Before Anna could answer, Ezra stepped in, carrying 2 saddlebags, hair still damp from washing up. He paused when he saw her. "You ready?" The softness in his tone surprised her every time. Not coddling, not pity, just steady. She nodded, and he gave one firm, reassuring nod back, like they'd made a silent agreement. After breakfast, they left for town, Anna riding in the wagon beside Miriam while Ezra walked ahead with the reins in hand. The closer they got to the main street, the louder the world became, merchants calling prices, horses snorting, children running between barrels, women collecting laundry. Then the whispers began. "That's her. The mail-order bride who got abandoned. Poor thing. Ezra brought her to his ranch. Did you hear?" Anna felt her chest tighten, her breath shorten. She kept her eyes on her hands, trying not to wilt under every glance. But Ezra stopped abruptly, turned, and looked at her, really looked at her. "Come walk with me," he murmured. She blinked. "Why?" "Because people talk less when I'm beside you." He said it like a fact, not a boast. And when he held out his hand, she placed hers in his, because somehow she already trusted that he would never let her fall. They walked together through town, Ezra's towering presence like a shield. And just as he said, voices softened. Eyes dropped. People straightened their backs when he passed. Miriam watched them from the wagon with a knowing half-smile. At the general store, Old Man Reeves raised his brow. "Heard some noise about you, Miss Boyd," he said. "But far as I'm concerned, any friend of Ezra's is welcome." Anna managed a small, grateful smile. "Thank you. And if that coward Carter steps foot in my shop, I'll charge him double for looking stupid." Ezra snorted. Anna couldn't help but laugh, a real, full laugh that startled her with how alive it felt. They gathered flour, lantern oil, sugar, nails, and when Anna reached for a small spool of blue ribbon, her hand paused. She whispered, almost embarrassed, "It's silly, but I always liked this color." Ezra didn't even glance at the price. "Get it." She looked up. "Ezra, it's not necessary. It's a ribbon," he said with a shrug. "If it makes you smile, it's worth more than half the things in this store." She felt heat rise in her cheeks, warmth blooming inside her chest, so suddenly it almost ached. On the way out, Mrs. Clemens approached, arms folded tight across her chest. "I don't think it's right," she said loudly. "A woman staying on a man's ranch who isn't his wife." The street went silent. Anna froze. Ezra's entire body changed, not violently, but with the kind of protective, anchored tension that warned a storm was about to crack open. He stepped forward, his shadow falling between Anna and Mrs. Clemens. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "this woman was abandoned on a train platform after crossing states alone. She has no kin here, and she has my protection." Mrs. Clemens sniffed. "Protection turns into gossip. Gossips ruin reputations." Ezra didn't blink. "Not hers." His voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a blade. Mrs. Clemens faltered, then huffed and walked away. Anna stood trembling, not from fear this time, but from the breathtaking realization that Ezra Hale had just defended her honor in front of the whole town. "Ezra," she whispered. He turned to her, eyes softening. "You all right?" She nodded slowly, breath unsteady. "I've never had anyone stand up for me like that." Ezra's voice dropped low. "Get used to it." She felt something shift in the space between them, invisible but strong enough that even the townsfolk felt it, their whispers turning into something new, something curious, something hopeful. As they loaded the wagon, Ezra helped her up, his hand steady at her waist, his touch gentle. When he climbed up beside her, the sun caught his profile, turning him gold for a moment. Anna looked at him, really looked, seeing him not just as the man who rescued her, but the man who might one day change the course of her life. And for the first time since she stepped onto that train, she wondered if the word home might finally mean something real. The wagon creaked softly as it rolled back toward the ranch, the afternoon sun dipping low enough to cast long stretches of wheat-colored light across the prairie. Anna sat beside Ezra, her fingers gently twisting the blue ribbon she'd chosen in the general store, the one he insisted she take. Every so often, she caught him glancing her way, not staring, not prying, just checking, as if making sure she was still steady. Miriam rode behind them on the saddle mule, humming some old hymn that floated warm through the wind. But as the ranch fences came into view, the weight Anna thought she had shed in town began to return, heavy and familiar. She had been abandoned once. She'd been humiliated, judged, whispered about. People didn't simply go home with a man, work in his kitchen, sit at his table, help on his land, not without questions, not without expectations, not without consequences. Ezra slowed the wagon near the barn, studying her quietly. "Long day," he said. "You did well." She nodded, but her hands tightened. He saw it instantly. "What's wrong?" she hesitated. "People talk." "Let them," he said. "They don't get a say in what happens to you." "Maybe not," she whispered. "But I do." Ezra blinked slowly, as if her words landed deeper than she meant them to. Miriam dismounted and led the mule toward the corral, giving them space. Ezra took a quiet breath and set the reins aside. "Anna," he said, turning to face her fully, "there's something I should have said sooner." Her stomach tightened. Here it comes, she thought, the thing men always say before disappointment follows, the thing she feared more than gossip, more than shame, rejection disguised as kindness. Ezra's voice was steady, but not cold. "You don't owe me anything." She looked up sharply. "What? Not work, not staying here, not gratitude. You don't owe me your future. You don't owe me your name. You don't even owe me your presence." Her heartbeat kicked painfully. "Ezra, why would you say that?" "Because I see the way your hands shake every time someone looks at you too long," he said softly. "I hear how your breath catches when a man raises his voice. You don't need another chain disguised as charity." She shook her head. "You've never, I know," he said gently, "but you're scared I might." Her throat tightened. He wasn't wrong, not about the fear, not about the bruised-in places that lived under her ribs. Ezra stepped down from the wagon, then held his hands up to help her down. When she hesitated, he kept them raised, not forcing, not urging, just offering. She placed her hands in his, because somehow she already trusted he would never use his strength to trap her. When her boots touched the ground, the world felt too close, too quiet. Ezra cleared his throat, almost awkward. "Walk with me?" She nodded. They walked toward the pasture, stopping near the wooden fence that overlooked miles of grassland softening into sunset. The breeze carried the earthy smell of cattle and warm dust. Ezra rested his arms on the fence rail, looking out across the land instead of at her. "I want to give you a choice," he said. "A real one." She swallowed. "What kind of choice?" "A place here," he said simply. "If you want it." Her breath caught. He kept his gaze on the horizon. "Not as a worker, not as an obligation, not because you've got nowhere to go. I want you to stay because you choose this place, choose safety, choose stillness, choose your own future." He finally looked at her. His eyes were warm, but there was something else in them now. Vulnerability, courage, a man braver than his own silence. "And if someday," he said quietly, "you choose me, I'll thank God every night for it, but I won't force a single step of it, not one." Anna felt her breath shatter in her chest. No man had ever spoken to her like that, not with hunger disguised as kindness, not with possession wrapped in promises, but with patience and reverence and startling honesty. She stepped closer to him without meaning to. "Ezra, you're free here," he murmured. "Free with me. That's the only thing I want you to hear." Her eyes blurred, tears rising before she could stop them. "No one's ever given me freedom," she whispered. "Then take mine," he said gently. "All of it." She looked up at him, the giant cowboy who carried her across the prairie, and didn't ask for anything in return. Not her body, not her loyalty, not her future, just her safety, just her peace, just her presence. Anna placed her hand over his heart, feeling the steady, honest rhythm beneath. "Ezra," she whispered, "I'm not ready to choose everything." "I know, but," she swallowed, "I choose to stay." His breath left him in a soft, stunned rush, as if she had just given him the one thing he never expected to receive. Hope. He covered her hand with his, warm and steady. "Then you're home," he said, voice low and full, "for as long as you want." And as the sun dropped behind the fields, casting gold across the fence line, Anna leaned into him, not as someone rescued, not as someone indebted, but as someone who finally believed she wasn't going to be left behind. Night settled over the ranch in layers of soft blue, the kind of quiet dusk that felt almost sacred, and Anna stood on the porch with her hands wrapped around a warm tin cup Miriam insisted she take. The day had felt impossibly long, frightening at dawn, uncertain at midday, overwhelming by afternoon. But here, under the lantern glow and the endless prairie sky, something in her chest finally loosened. Inside, Miriam hummed while finishing supper, moving with a peaceful rhythm that felt older than the house itself. Ezra stood a few steps away, tightening the saddle strap on his big sorrel gelding, even though he wasn't riding anywhere tonight. She watched him for a moment, the way the lantern light brushed the broad line of his shoulders, the patient gentleness in everything he touched, and wondered how small her life had been before this day. How narrow, how lonely. He finished the strap and looked up, catching her watching him. He didn't smile exactly, but something warm flickered over his face anyway. "You settling in all right?" he asked quietly. Anna nodded, feeling something warm press against her ribs. "Mm-hmm." It wasn't a full word, but it was all she had. "Good," he said, stepping onto the porch. "If you need anything, anything at all, you just tell me or Miriam. This place is yours, same as ours." The statement hit her deeper than he knew. Yours. No one had ever said that to her. Her rooms had always belonged to employers or husbands or matchmakers or trains or wagons, but never her. The weight of it made her chest tighten. Miriam opened the door behind them. "Supper's ready," she said softly. "Eat while it's fresh." Anna followed them inside, the warmth of the kitchen wrapping around her like a quilt. The table was small, sturdy, worn from years of work, and somehow felt more like a home than any fancy dining hall she'd ever seen. Ezra bowed his head briefly before eating, a gesture so natural she almost missed it, and then he began talking quietly with Miriam about fence repairs, feed orders, a cow giving birth early. Not dramatic things, not heroic things, just life, simple, steady life. And every soft exchange, every quiet breath, every scrape of spoon against plate made her chest ache with a feeling she hadn't known in years: belonging. After supper, Miriam insisted Anna take the small back bedroom. "It's warmest," she said, "and the window looks out over the prairie. Good for sleeping, good for dreaming." Anna touched the quilt folded on the bed, hand-stitched, thick, smelling faintly of cedar, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a temporary guest. She felt placed, chosen, even without being asked to earn it. Ezra paused at the doorway, removing his hat like he always did before speaking. "There's a lantern on the stand," he said, "and if the wind gets loud tonight, don't be scared. The roof's old, but it holds." Does it get loud often?" she asked softly. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but you're safe here." The words wrapped around her more securely than the quilt ever could. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Ezra hesitated, then, very gently, placed one hand against the doorframe as if anchoring himself. "Anna," he said quietly, "you don't need to make sense of today. Not tonight. Rest is enough." Her breath caught. Rest. The one thing she'd been running toward and away from all her life. She nodded again. He stepped back, letting her have the room, the space, the night. "Good night," he murmured. "Good night," she whispered back. Later, after she washed her face in the little basin, after she braided her hair, after she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the moonlit prairie through the window, she finally lay down. And for the first time since she boarded that train as a mail-order bride destined for a man who never showed, Anna did not fear the morning. She drifted to sleep with one final truth beating quietly but steadily at the center of her chest. She wasn't alone anymore. And somewhere across the house, sitting at the kitchen table with his hat in his hands, Ezra stared at the lantern flame and let a small, disbelieving ache rise in his heart, because the woman sleeping under his roof wasn't a stranger anymore. She was the first calm his soul had known in years,